Hi everyone, Cassie here from Primrose Dawn, and welcome to week 4 of the Delvine Bralette sew-along. This week we will be attaching the back bands using the burrito method to encase the seams, and we will be attaching the bottom band elastic. Let's get started. We'll now be moving on to step 5 on page 13 of the instructions. We will be attaching the bands to the front and cradle unit using the burrito method. So to begin, I have the front and cradle unit right side facing up, and I'm going to move the cradle lining away from the cradle and towards the cups just to get it out of the way. And I'm going to put the band right sides together on top of the cradle, and I'm just going to hold it together with a couple of pins, one at the top, one at the bottom, with the ends of the pins facing out, because in a minute I'm going to have to readjust those pins. Oops. Okay, so now I'm going to roll the cradle towards the side seam, and then I'm going to start at the top of the cups and roll it down until we expose the cradle lining that we folded back. Now we're going to bring this cradle lining over on top of the band. So now I have the cradle lining, in the middle is the band, and on the back is the cradle itself. And I'm going to line all these edges and repin. So I can take out that first pin I added. Oops. It's hard to get all 3 layers aligned. Okay. Oops. So now I'm going to go to my machine and sew with a 1/4 inch seam just in a regular straight stitch. Finish sewing this seam. Now I'm going to turn it all right sides out again. You can see the side seam is sewn, and on the inside the seam allowances are encased between the cradle and the cradle lining. I'm going to repeat this for the other side. We're now ready to attach the bottom band elastic. I wrapped the elastic around my rib cage and subtracted 2 inches. So I've cut my elastic in the length that is comfortable for me. And this isn't in the instructions, but this is something that I usually do. I smoothed out both layers of the cradle and added some pins about 1 inch from the bottom, just to make sure that the layers are really smooth, and once I attach the elastic there won't be any kind of bubbling from the layers not being the same length when I attach the elastic together, elastic to both layers of the cradle. And I've also added a pin vertically in the center, and then I've put a pin in the middle of my elastic so I know how much I need to stretch it from one edge to the center. And this is our last chance to kind of adjust for the hook and eye. In the beginning of the pattern I tell you how to adjust the pattern pieces if your hook and eye is a different measurement from the 2 1/4 inches that I use. But we could also adjust it here. So here's my eyes, my hook and eye, and I'm aligning it with the top, where the top of the lace goes. That's where it's going to get attached. And I'm just going to lay the elastic on top here. So this is where I'm going to sew it, aligning the bottom edge of the elastic with the bottom edge of the bralette, and this will get turned back. And we want to make sure there isn't any gaps from where the bottom of the hook and eye is to where the elastic begins. We want to make sure that those are lined up. So this looks good. So now I'm ready to attach the elastic. Before I begin sewing, I just want to point out the importance of thread color in these steps. Now I will be using the turquoise so that you can see where I'm stitching on here. Normally I would change my top thread and bobbin thread colors to match whatever layer it is I'm sewing on. And this bralette is a good example. You can see that I have switched my thread colors. I used turquoise on this part to blend in with the fabric, and then I switched to pink to blend in with the power net. And on the back side, I used a darker pink so that it blended in with the elastic. It really is worth it to go to the trouble of changing your thread colors just so that everything blends in and looks nice. But for this video, I'm just going to be using a contrasting color so you can see what I'm doing. I have the elastic flush side up with the picots facing inwards, and the bottom of the elastic is aligned with the bottom edge of the fabric, and I have the bralette right side up as well. I've already sunk my needle down. My machine centers the zigzags, so I had to play a little bit to figure out where it's making the edge of the zigzag. I'm using a medium width on my machine. It's about a 2.5 width and 2 length, just a regular zigzag for attaching in this first pass. And I'm going to be stretching the elastic slightly. Starting to approach the center here, so I know just how much more I need to be stretching my elastic so that my pins align. Don't want to run over a pin. Try to get as close to that picot edge as you can without going over. Okay, I'm at my vertical pins now. Need to take out that pin. See, I'm starting to get a little bit over the edge. Don't do that. Okay, now I'm grabbing onto the end of the elastic and the end of the bralette. Now that's out of the frame, you can't see that. That's going to help me stretch it the appropriate amount until the end. Okay, now that first pass of the elastic is sewn. Here is the band sewn to the bralette. I have already trimmed away the excess fabric to reduce some of the bulk. And I just want to point out that if you are sewing cradle H, this first step of sewing the elastic to the bralette would look a little different. You would only be attaching the elastic to the band portions and not the cradle, because the cradle would have that nice scalloped edge. So that's a little different. That would be step 10. And since we are doing back I, we will continue on to step 7 of the instructions, and that also applies to back K. If you're doing back J, the next step would be attaching the strap attachments. So we will be folding the elastic to the inside and adding a second pass of elastic. And I'm going to be using a 3-step zigzag. I have my machine set to a 3-step zigzag, and I have already sunk the needle down. I have the elastic folded to the inside. This is the right side of the bralette facing up. And I have the top edge of the elastic, which I can feel through the bralette, aligned with the inner edge of my foot. And I know that the zigzags won't extend past that. And I am going to try to match the top thread colors with whatever the fabric color is. So since I have the turquoise thread in my top thread, I'm going to only go as far as the band, and then I'm going to stop, or hopefully I'll remember to stop, and then I'm going to change to white thread when I continue to sew over the cradle. I'm stretching just a little bit so that I can get the fabric flat. Okay, I'm right at the seam here, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. And I'm going to switch out my top thread and continue. Here is the finished elastic band. As you can see, this side over here has the turquoise stitching, and then I went and changed to a white thread for going over the cradle, and then back again to the turquoise. On the inside, I kept the turquoise in the bobbin thread, just so you could see the stitching, and my stitching is pretty wobbly, but hopefully you will have changed your thread colors so that it blends in. And everything is nice and flat, so I'm happy with how it turned out. That's it for this week. Next week we will be attaching the fold-over elastic along the neck and armhole edges. We will be attaching the straps, and we will be adding the hook and eye closure. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. Bye for now.